We're here with Bill Sullivan, Executive Vice President of Advocacy at American Trucking Associations. Bill, talk to us about the legislative priorities for ATA this spring.
We, this spring, are optimistic that even in an election year, we have the opportunity to take on some issues that are really important for the industry. We inherit, we had a great 2017, or given the set of partisan consequences that were coming with how Congress ran many of the legislative bills through under reconciliation. We feel very good about some of our chief priorities, foremost among them being tax. And so the tax reform bill was something that our membership was very engaged in and very happy with the outcome on. We had a lot of input in that as the leadership and the tax writing committees in the White House was involved. So coming out of a really strong 2017, we see an election year, we see a partisan year where it looks like it'll be difficult. But with that said, we do have some issues that we feel pretty good about. F4A, the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act of 1994, or preemption provision that we're seeking right now in Congress, is still in front of us. We tried like crazy to win this in the end of last Congress, and the appropriations bill, the vehicle in which it was best suited, did not pass in any robust way. And so this CR that was into January is right now our focus. And so the CR runs out January 19th. The coalition with whom we work, the coalition that we lead, an F4A coalition, has been working very hard on this. We have discussed the merits of this within every corner of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate committees. We've also discussed it an awful lot with the administration as we've built up a better working relationship with not just the Department of Transportation, but within the White House. And so we are leaving no stone unturned in our efforts to highlight how important this is for the industry.
What indications are you getting from members of Congress that the F4A will be part of this upcoming funding deal?
Key members of Congress prioritize this. And so one example would be Kevin McCarthy from California, the majority leader in the House. This has been a key priority of his. Much of the ability to succeed in playing on an appropriations process depends on what the context is when the bill passes. And so is it an omnibus or a standalone bill? Is it one that involves a lot of compromises, or one that is sort of a partisan push through? And we anticipate that this bill is going to have to be fairly bipartisan and that there will be a lot of compromise. So we hope that the conditions are such, and we hear from members of Congress that this is very high on their priority list. We have met with the Speaker and the Majority Leader. We have met with Majority Leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, his staff. We have met with, and members of our coalition, not just ATA, have met with Democratic leadership, both in the House and Senate. And so we are hearing positive leanings, but again, so much of this depends on the context when the bill actually passes and the conditions that are going. So as an example, I would say if funds for building a wall on the southern border or some immigration provision was the most focused debate at the time of passage, it may take a little steam out of some of the efforts that F4A proponents have, as well as for this myriad of, I say myriad, many dozens of other legislative attempts that are attracted by the appropriations process every year. So I don't read tea leaves. I do the best we can to, if a door opens, we're able to walk through it. You know, how do we make the case as best we can, as bipartisan as we can, and how do we work to win it? We had heard really favorable information last year as Congress worked into the omnibus process, and the context at the end didn't play out the way we needed it to. I'm very proud of the work that both ATA and the coalition did. But the conditions weren't there when the bill was finished on a Saturday, and over a Saturday night into a Sunday. And so we're doing the best we can to be where we are. We hear positive feedback from the champions of the bill. I think Senate engagement this year is more than it was last year, and that was a key point that we thought would be difficult. Senator Deb Fischer sent a letter, I forget the exact number, but I want to say 33 senators wrote to Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, the majority and minority leader in the Senate, saying we need to take care of this. And so We've spent a lot of time on the Senate side while continuing to shore up our House friends, and I feel pretty good about it.
Let's turn our attention to something that the Senate Commerce Committee was working on, and it's on the floor now, I believe. It's autonomous vehicle legislation. Going in this year, 2018, where can trucking find a home in any autonomous legislation?
As you know, I believe the trucking industry is not yet represented in the Commerce Committee reported bill. The House Energy and Commerce Committee did a similar effort that has passed the House with trucking specifically excluded, which we were not happy about at all. You know, it is our strong belief, and most people that we interact with on the committees that have jurisdiction, be they transportation committees or safety-related committees, so whether Energy and Commerce, Transportation and Infrastructure in the House, or Senate Commerce Committee, or the Environment and Public Works Committee in the Senate, most of the members and staff understand that passenger cars and commercial vehicles share the roads. And so if there are going to be incentives and rules surrounding how the country will support innovation to increase safety and improve markets and innovation, that it strikes us as absurd that you would have one focus on passenger vehicles, light-duty vehicles, and a separate focus to the point of exclusion of commercial vehicles. And largely also, as Chris Spears testified, and I in almost all of my meetings and all of the ATA staff discusses, if there are to be technologies, automation and technologies that are adopted in cars, trucks, commercial vehicles, the adoption rate in commercial fleets and commercial vehicles and the OEMs that supply them tend to adopt more quickly than, in fact, whether it's a large car OEM, you know, General Motors, foreign car companies, Mercedes or Toyota, or just to pick a few, customers are evaluating whether it's worth $5,000 or $2,500 to have a steering wheel that buzzes or to have a special kind of braking system. And I've heard anecdotal evidence that there are really high rates of turning those systems off because people don't like the beeping and the buzzing. And so in commercial fleets, the adoption rates and the safety benefits are a business proposition and not an emotional proposition. And so we really do believe that commercial vehicles are likely to drive some of the largest safety improvements as there's adoption. So we continue to press that issue. I believe that the conditions are going to be better as we come into this year, partly because as the Commerce bill, Senate Commerce Committee bill has moved to the floor, it's slowed down. There's not unanimity, and there is recognition not only of our issue about commercial vehicles, but also of concerns that some safety advocates have about other specific things. And so the committee and the Senate has not yet coalesced around a consensus piece of legislation, would be my read and review on sort of where we are. As they haven't, I believe it is an opportunity now for that consensus to still develop. While it didn't develop on the committee or within the committee, I do believe that there's a chance that we can do this. There are also new players in the game. And so one example is John Tester. Senator John Tester, Democrat from Montana, just joined the Commerce Committee. John Tester is the only CDL holder in the Senate and has been a champion on not every issue for trucking, but a number. And so F4A is one great example where he understands trucking. And so we do think that we always have the opportunity to make the case with the people who pay the closest attention. His is a new face. We've seen the announcement that Chairman Schuster, House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman Schuster, is going to retire. Among the people who might replace him would be two who are reported to be pretty interested in succeeding him, would be Congressman Jeff Denham from California, Congressman Sam Graves from Missouri. Congressman Graves has expressed a deep interest in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee digging more deeply into this. At this point, we don't know if that could be hearings or could be legislation, but it gives us hope that this debate isn't closed and that we have an opportunity to dig deeper in terms of policy making on automated vehicles for commercial vehicles.
President Trump has talked about infrastructure. There's a lot of impetus about advancing a long-term fix for the Highway Trust Fund and reaching this $1 trillion mark that the president was calling for. What is the ATA's take on the infrastructure plan?
Take on the infrastructure plan, we support an infrastructure plan. The devil's in the details. I know that as I was joining ATA a little bit more than a year ago, it was before the November presidential election. If we look back to that time point, Congress had just passed the FAST Act in December of the prior year. So Congress wasn't saying it's time to do an infrastructure bill. They had just done one. And in fact, in terms of Water Resources Development Act, which inside the Beltway types like me called the WRDA bill, but WRDA had just passed, F4A authorization, so all the infrastructure bills had moved or were moving. So it really was the president who led the way in the campaign, and Hillary Clinton took up the charge and also said a lot of things we loved about infrastructure. So we are enthusiastic that the president might be leading this toward a new conclusion. The devil's really in the details. And we, shortly after the November election, Chris Spear did accelerate the work of an infrastructure task force that ATA had created to help inform what the options might be in terms of not just what the money is spent on and what kind of infrastructure we need to address, but also the magic question that everybody worries about, and that is, how could we deal with revenue? That any kind of infrastructure bill that's going to move in a really tight, likely to be more partisan than normal election year is going to have some center point that brings everybody to the table. And a small infrastructure bill that, for example, only talks about private investment in infrastructure and doesn't talk about shoring up the federal funding. ATA for a long time has supported reasonable increases in user fees. And so the task force took up the charge, produced a proposal, the Build America Fund or the Build America Plan. And so we, as this debate kicks off, we've been waiting for the president and Congress to clear the decks on the few things that they tried to do last year. So healthcare reform was one, tax reform was another, and now we're excited that as we move into the State of the Union, we move into the president reportedly getting close to engaging this as his priority issue, that the debate will be filled with a number of different voices, including ours front and center. So we have worked with a number of other groups who depend on infrastructure, from construction groups to unions that do the work, to the Chamber of Commerce, to shippers, our customers and all the people in sort of the infrastructure chain. And we've worked very much toward a consensus of we have to do a real bill, we have to address the trust fund, we have to make investments now in projects. As I think the American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI, puts out a study every year of freight bottlenecks and the 100 freight bottlenecks. Those freight bottlenecks are places where not only trucks and freight are held up, but also dads and moms who are going to work or to daycare or to the hospital. So the same bottlenecks that our trucks are slowing down and sitting in traffic are decreasing the quality of people's lives. We, in our congestion study, or ATRI's congestion study, we had
$63 billion annually, and the impact on truck.
We did. We had this massive impact, and another metric or similar way to frame that metric is how many drivers stopped in traffic for a year. That's 360,000 if I remember, but somewhere in the 300,000s. When we have a 50,000 driver shortage and we have a tight economy and freight rates, for all these different pieces of the supply chain are pushing towards a tightening, that's a good problem to have. We want to have a strong economy. We want to have great relationships with our shippers, but we need to have an efficient system so that, as we get 50,000 plus drivers in for not just the drivers we need today, but also those who may be leaving over the years, that we're bringing in efficiencies so that we tighten that down and don't gum up our supply chain and slow the economy. So we're hoping to get to a place that we can really make a dent in the infrastructure that changes people's lives, helps the economy, and while those sound Pollyannish and optimistic, they're exactly why we're trying to do it.
We're going to stay tuned all year to those plans and trucking priorities, and it's going to be a good year. Bill Sullivan with ATA, and check out ttnews.com.